So we're going to continue with our work for today. And at this part, we're going to go and complete number 6, which is 3.2 heat transfer activity. And this is it here. Here I have vocabulary that will be useful. We have vocabulary like conductor, insulator, thermal energy, hot, cold. And here's some rules for heat transfer, and I want you to copy this down. So copy this down. Copy this down. It's important. So heat, some of the things that we want to know and remember is that heat flow and heat transfer mean the same thing. We also want to know that heat moves from high temperature to low temperature. Or another way to say that is that heat moves from hot to cold. And an example of a high temperature is water boils at 100 degrees Celsius and it freezes at 0 degrees Celsius. Okay. Something else that's important to understand is conduction is heat transfer by touch. Convection is heat transfer by gas or liquid. And radiation is heat transfer by light, or another word for light is, can you think of it? It's electromagnetic waves. And so these are 6 important rules for heat transfer that you should keep in mind. And if we look at the first picture and graph, we want to look at part C. And this C means it's kind of easy. It's not something that should be too difficult. B gets a little bit more difficult, and A is a little bit more difficult because it involves some writing. And I will explain how to do this and how to you can write or structure your sentences. Let's do C. Draw arrows showing the direction of heat flow or heat transfer. So we know in the rules that heat moves from high temperature to low temperature. So I can find the high temperature and the low temperature, and I want to draw an arrow going from high to low. And I can make that line bigger and easier to see. So the arrow, the heat, goes from high to low. So this is showing heat flow. Heat also on this side goes from high to low. So I can draw that arrow going left, make it larger. So that is showing heat going from C to B, high to low. Now it says draw the arrow, or draw a line, should make this line, showing the temperature of A over time. So A starts at 80 degrees Celsius. And if we come to the graph, we're going to find 80 here. And we want to draw an arrow from 80, and we need to decide 80, what's happening to the temperature of 80? If it is losing the heat to B, the heat is going to B. Does that mean the temperature will increase, decrease, or stay the same? And it is losing heat. If you lose something, generally the value goes down. So the temperature of B will go down over time. And it will get close to 20. It will get close. It will get somewhere between 20 and 80, but not go below. It will not go below that. Okay? So that's my arrow, that's my line. It's okay if you draw an arrow. If you just use a line, that's fine. I'm going to do that. Ooh, and I can change the color here. I can make it red if I want. Okay, beautiful red. Okay, now the heat transfer between A and B. A and B. Now I see they are touching. If they are touching, let's go here, touching. Okay, so that's important. Touching. If they're touching, that means we have conduction. So I'm going to use this form. The heat is transferred between object A and B with conduction because they are touching. Okay, and you are going to continue to use this form here for your other sentences. So the heat is transferring between A and B with, and here we said they're touching, so it's conduction because they are touching. So that answers this part. Now we're going to go to A here. In which direction does the heat energy transfer between B and C? So is the heat going from B to C, or is it going from C to B? And you can just look at the direction of the arrow. It is going from C to B. And so here our form will be the heat energy is transferring from, and we said object C to object B. That's it. And so, this is the form of the sentence I want to use here. Let me make that better. The heat energy is transferring from blank to blank. That's the Ford mine. I'm going to fill that in with these words here. Okay. All right. And let's see. We can do one more. Let's do a difficult one here. It's a little bit more difficult, but it's very, very similar. All right. So draw arrows showing the direction of heat flow or heat transfer. Okay. So I have three objects. So I'm going to show heat transfer between these two and these two objects. I moved to a pink box because these are more difficult questions. The green are easier questions. The red is more difficult. So I'll go again. Draw arrows showing the direction of heat flow. Assume heat flows from block Z to Y. So it's telling me heat flows from block Z to block Y. So I'm going to draw an arrow from Z to Y. That was easy. Then it says heat flows from block Y to X. So I'm going to draw an arrow from Y to X. Increase the size. So I finished C. This is an easy question, C. Now I'm going to go to B. It says draw arrows showing the temperature of Y over time. So Y, if this is 40 and this is 30, then Y has to be between those temperatures, between 40 and 30. All right, it cannot be hotter, because if it was hotter, if this was 100, if Y was 100, then the arrow would be going the other way, but it's not. It is going this way. So that means that the temperature for y is between z and x. So I'm going to draw an arrow between 40 and between 30. Here's 40, here's 30. I'm going to draw an arrow, just flat arrow. Let me try that again. And let's just draw that. Okay, it's between 40, it's between 30, and that's my arrow. Maybe this time I'll make it a blue arrow. Blue. Is the heat transferred between x and y with conduction, convection, or radiation? And if I look at these two, they are touching. Touching means conduction. So I go back here and I can write I'm going to use my form, the same forma as this here. Same form. The heat is transferred between object x and y with conduction because they are touching. Okay? And now, in which direction does the heat energy transfer between x and y? So between x and y, this gives you the answer here, and it tells us that the heat flows, the heat transfers from y to x. So I'm going to use this form here. I'm going to use that. It's going to make my life easier. The heat energy is transferring from object y to object x. Okay, that's it. So your goal is to finish 2 more on your own. All right, copy these down, copy 3, copy 7, and copy the notes, and then finish 2 more on your own.